The Battle of King's Landing, a Retelling. Part 1. The Calm Before the Storm. The bells of King's Landing had always been a sound of commerce, worship, and daily life. But on the morning when Daenerys Targaryen's forces encamped on the outskirts of the city, their muted echoes became an omen of dread. The Red Keep, once a proud symbol of Targaryen power and now the lair of Queen Cersei Lannister, loomed like a crimson sentinel above the teeming streets. Beneath it, the narrow alleys were swollen with refugees, men and women clutching children, baskets, and small treasures, all drawn into the city by the promise of sanctuary and the threat of dragonfire. Outside the walls, a very different scene unfolded. The Unsullied stood in perfect ranks, spears gleaming like a forest of steel under the pale sun. To their left, the Dothraki horsemen sat astride restless steeds, dark braids and curved rocks glinting as they whispered war chants in their guttural tongue. At their center, Tyrion Lannister stood beside Jon Snow, eyes fixed on the city he had once ruled as Hand. His expression was haunted. This was not the liberation he had envisioned. Jon Snow had fought in many battles, against Boltons, undead, and wildlings, but this siege bore a different weight. He could feel it in the tension of his men, in the silent gaze of Grey Worm at the front of the unsullied phalanx, and in the low growl of the Dothraki's horses. War was coming, but war without honor was something else entirely. High above, Daenerys Targaryen circled on the back of Drogon. The dragon's black scales caught the sunlight like molten iron, and each beat of his colossal wings sent gusts rippling over the army below. Her silver hair whipped across her face as she stared at the city, her city stolen by usurpers and traitors. In her mind burned a single thought: justice. But justice, in that moment, had taken on the shape of fire. Inside the Red Keep, Queen Cersei stood at a window overlooking the city. She wore a gown of deep crimson, armored at the shoulders, a golden lion brooch pinned over her heart. Her green eyes held no fear. The Iron Fleet had been destroyed, the Golden Company decimated, and yet she refused to surrender. Pride was her armor, and vengeance her weapon. Beside her, Qyburn whispered counsel, but she barely heard him. She had already chosen her course. Down in the city's streets, the bells began to toll. A shiver of hope passed through the crowds. Bells meant surrender. In the minds of the small folk, the ringing promised mercy. Mothers pulled their children closer, whispering prayers to the Seven. Even some of the Lannister soldiers atop the battlements loosened their grips on spears, exchanging glances heavy with relief. On the ground below, Tyrion turned to Jon. "They're surrendering," he said, voice trembling with a mixture of relief and dread. "The city is ours." Jon nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the dragon circling above. He could sense it. Daenerys was not finished. Part 2. Fire Made Flesh. From Drogon's back, Daenerys stared at the Red Keep. Her breathing quickened. Every memory of betrayal rose like smoke: her father's murder, her brother's death, the loss of Missandei, the constant treachery of Westerosi lords. She had crossed the narrow sea to free people from tyranny, but here she saw only the same chains, the same sneering faces. Cersei's city was not innocent. It was complicit. Below, Grey Worm looked up as Drogon released a roar that shook the very stones. The Unsullied tensed, spears braced. Jon felt the heat of that sound like a physical force. "No," he murmured, almost pleading to no one. "Please, no." Then Drogon dived. A jet of flame erupted from his jaws, slamming into the battlements not far from the main gate. The stones exploded, hurling Lannister soldiers into the air like rag dolls. The bells continued to ring, but now their chime was swallowed by screams. Another burst of dragonfire lanced down the street, turning fleeing men, women, and horses into shadows of ash. Jon's heart clenched. This was not battle. This was slaughter. He shouted for his men to hold position, but the Dothraki surged forward, their war cries rising like a tidal wave. Grey Worm hurled his spear into a fallen Lannister soldier and drew his short blade, signaling the Unsullied to advance. The disciplined phalanx moved with lethal precision, cutting down all who resisted and many who did not. Inside the city, chaos reigned. Families trampled one another trying to escape the inferno. Horses bolted, overturning carts and spilling grain into the fire-lit streets. In the Red Keep, Cersei watched the city burn with widening eyes. Her smirk faltered for the first time. She had gambled on Daenerys' restraint, on the image of the breaker of chains. She had underestimated the fury of a dragon queen. Drogon rose again, wings carving through smoke. Daenerys leaned low against his neck, eyes blazing with tears and rage. Every street she scorched was another link in the chain broken, or so she told herself. Fire was cleansing. Fire was justice. But deep down, some part of her knew the truth. This was vengeance. Jon fought to keep his men from descending into madness. "Fall back!" he shouted, pushing through the melee. But the Northmen were already lost, hacking at surrendering soldiers, looting homes, and dragging screaming women into alleys. The moral line had dissolved in dragonfire.